Hi, welcome to this week's episode of PAX Presents with Lenovo Legion. Now, something we like to do at PAX every year, and honestly we're gutted we don't get the opportunity, is to show off the amazing homegrown indie developer content. If you've ever been to PAX, you'll see on the show floor we get people from all over the country of all sizes just connecting with fans and showing off their games. Obviously, we can't do that this year, but we wanted to still give everyone a little bit of taste of that because we make some amazing games here in Australia. There are some amazing studios doing some fantastic work. And for this week's episode, we're going to check in with a few of them. We're going to hear some of their stories. We're going to hear how they're progressing in really uncertain and difficult times. And hopefully you might find a few cool games that you want to check out. First up, we've got Dragonbear Studios. They are working on something incredibly Australian, and I'm a sucker for a pun in the name. The game they're working on is called Enchanted. Let's hear from them.
All right. Energy, being ready for things. Warming up? Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Ben. I'm the technical... I'm going to just start that again.
Hi, I'm Paulina. I'm the creative director of Dragonbear Studios, and we're making Enchanted. Enchanted is a wonderful cooperative game where you play together and brew magical potions, make meals, fight or feed monsters, do all sorts of wild things to run your magical inn. The game is broken up into a day phase where you play and serve customers, and at the night where you relax a little bit and make choices and prepare for the next day that will impact how the customers might perceive you. The game is a bit of a mix of like Animal Crossing with Overcooked, with Moon Hunters. It's a very fantasy-driven game where we'd love to see people playing together and learning to communicate. It's a bit like Overcooked during the day and Animal Crossing during the night. There's actually a few inspirations. Potion Punch has been an inspiration. Moon Hunters has been a huge inspiration. That's kind of where a lot of our ideas about the night phase have come from. But definitely, yeah, the kind of aesthetic of Animal Crossing, which we were thinking about before it came out, so that was kind of funny. There's some Overcooked vibes in there too, but a bit more complexity and different kinds of tasks.
Yeah, as well as a bit of the ownership of your own kind of place, sort of a bit like Stardew Valley as well. Like you get a bit connected to like your farm, and there's a point in time in Enchanted where it'll be your inn, and where that goes as well, and just your sense of belonging, which is really fun to explore. We've got a fantastic world set in a fantasy Australia. We explore lots of themes like what Indigenous hospitality would be like in a fantasy world, and we share culture of the world's oldest civilization.
I love fantasy, and I love tabletop games and D&D, and so I've played in every setting, but I'd never played in a setting that was kind of Aboriginal or Indigenous-inspired fantasy setting. So I was really excited to think about what would happen if you were to play D&D, and you were in a kind of magical imagining of Aboriginal Australia. What would the interesting creatures be like? I'd love to know more about like what the culture would be like and the lore of that particular setting would be. And so I chatted with some of my friends in the Indigenous community, and they were all very excited about the idea because they felt like, you know, Indigenous and an Aboriginal culture isn't really showcased much in mainstream media, and it is very unique and interesting. So we thought, well, we'd love to work with some artists and see what that type of collaboration could bring. And I guess 2 years later, here we are.
Every piece of Indigenous content and culture that we showcase in our game was created by Indigenous artists. Every concept that we share is something that's come and been designed for us by them. We employ an Indigenous consultant, Phoebe, who goes and contacts the different tribes and different people, and she herself collates that information into sort of things that are important to be shown, shouldn't be shown, and what collaborations they had in mind and what can help shape our path.
So when we started working with Phoebe, she went off into the world and caught up with elders, and they fed a lot of ideas into us as well. They were like, we want to see this happening, and we want to see this, and here's an idea of this particular story. And that was really exciting to us because that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to work with the community. A bunch of the people in the community and the artists that we spoke to were also just really excited about seeing their culture be in games and having their kids play a game on Switch or PC and getting to kind of accept that, yeah, actually our culture is amazing and it has something very interesting to bring.
I just think there's a lot of games out there, and a lot of them are kind of based in European fantasy. And so I was like, well, I'll try something different. Let's try make a game that's based in Australia. It's in our backyard. There's inspiration for it every moment that we're here. Every time we go for a walk, it's just everywhere. And I think that's something that we wanted to share, because I think there's a lot of people that would love to come and visit Australia, and it's pretty far away, so I understand if they can't. So perhaps we can take some of the cool things about Australia and bring it to them.
I think part of it is helping reframe what is magical and what is romantic, and such of when you think romance, you might think of Paris. You just haven't been shown parts of the world that aren't fitting your stereotype. Like I think normalizing and showcasing games and culture from other parts of the world is powerful. People love the game. The hardest part is tearing them away from it, especially at PAX when we've got so many people to go through. You've had it for 20 minutes. Can you please? I'm sorry, I get it, but please move on. They got really sad. We had a couple that came and they were sort of like, I wouldn't say it was like tense, but like it was just a little bit of stress. And like they sat down, and our game at that point had about 15 minutes of content, and it just loops. They sat there, they were sort of like, did all right. Then they started getting better. They started communicating and talking, and then all of a sudden they were a well-oiled machine, and they sat there, and it was nearly the end of the day, so they played the game for a full hour. And at the end, I think they left there with a stronger relationship than they started. Like that was very interesting to watch. It was pretty joyous, actually.
Something that I really loved about PAX was just I actually didn't even get to run my booth very much. My team ran most of it. But every time between speaking appointments and things, I would come back to the booth. The crowd would just be bigger and bigger. And I was like, is that really my booth? Because there are so many people over there. And that was just the most exciting and exhilarating thing that, after 2 years of hard work, we finally got to show all the things that we were working in, and people loved it. That was just a really amazing thing.
I stopped navigating by signs. I didn't go look up. Whereas ours, I'd where are all those people? All right, here we are. It's us.
That we've had a lot of support in Victoria, and we're really lucky for that.
Predominantly from Film Victoria, who have been strong partners with us. Their support has been invaluable, and it allows us to be able to pay Indigenous consultants, artists, and the rest of our team to help bring a greater game than Paulina and myself together could have done without their support.
Additionally, City of Melbourne has also supported us during the kind of COVID thing going on. Acme have also sponsored us and been really supportive of us. We've got a residency with them. It's a little bit delayed because of COVID, unfortunately. We had to move into our office and then immediately move out. Perhaps when that's over, we're very excited to move back into Acme X and work with that creative team there. It's very hard. Our team's been so lovely, but it's just hard because there's that extra interface of normally I'd just be able to walk over to their desk and be like, hey, this is the answer to your question. But now I have to type a message or organize a Discord call, and that is an extra layer of stress that's kind of annoying and creates miscommunications and things like that. I think the hardest part of it is just also that when we were together at Acme, we were just having a lot more fun because we could tell jokes and puns. Their team is really sweet. They listen to all my puns, and that's harder to do on chat, if that makes sense.
I don't know if it's just the particular eclectic team we have, but you can have non-serious time with people across borders and wherever they are in the world or Australia, and you don't game dev isn't necessarily as serious as other places, and don't feel that now that you're in a home office that you must be 100% work at all times. We're just not like that. Honestly, yeah, it's been strange. The journey's been longer than I ever thought it would be, but at the same time, we've reached high peaks throughout it that I really didn't expect either when beginning game dev. Because Paulina and I started this ourselves. We weren't game devs before this. This is our first go at it, and to have made the impact that we've made so far has been unexpected but very welcome.
Our studio is one of the most diverse studios in Australia, and I think that shows in the things we make. We've been trying to make an ethical studio that showcases lots of diverse voices and it has lots of women on the team and people from different cultures, and obviously a bunch of indigenous game designers and musicians, which is really cool, and artists. And even just that has been really interesting. We're trying to make a game that will bring people together, and I think hopefully we're on the right track, because our studio has been really fun to work with.
Next up, we've got Simon Boxer from Twice Different. They're working on a game called Ring of Pain, which if you were at PAX last year, you might remember won the Indie Showcase. It's an amazing card-based roguelike. Think Slay the Spire, if you've ever checked that out. Let's see what they've been up to.
Hey, I'm Simon Boxer. I am the director of Twice Different, an indie studio based in Melbourne.
You made this world in your image. It's a sick joke. An affliction. A creeping curse that swallows you whole. A fallen, broken, lost control. And now a choice is in your hands. The Ring of Pain and its demands. Plan your moves with watchful eyes. Engage, attack, or sneak aside. Forge a path with choices wise. Observe the ring and strategize. Mix and match within confines of items, types, and slots defined. Seeking treasure, strength compounds. Passive powers, some profound. When death approaches, readjust. Your final choice is who to trust.
Ring of Pain is a new type of roguelike dungeon crawler hybrid where each level is a ring of encounters that dynamically adjust based on your actions. You dive into a dark world where looks deceive, you meet strange friends bearing gifts and treasure, and you choose your loot wisely to survive and discover the mysteries of the Ring of Pain. So the core gameplay, we present dungeons which are levels of cards that are arranged in a ring. And so the idea is that you can observe and see what's around and see what's coming. Each card represents an encounter, so I was thinking, what would a dungeon crawler be like if you took out all of the empty hallways, all of the sort of like blank tiles that you need to progress through, and just brought each encounter to you in the form of a card. So we give people limited actions that they can do at any time, but it's sort of distilled down, so you can choose to interact with an encounter, or you can choose to try to pass, which like acts as a stealth roll mechanic to rotate the ring as a sort of way of moving, and then it's layered on with a bunch of sort of item effects that you can get from loot drops to build up and manage your inventory to create like synergies that let you deal with the ring and the things that are in it in different ways. Art-wise, I would say the inspirations are like concept art, illustration, graphic design, even surreal photography and medical imagery. I sort of wanted to create an art style that explored the idea of aphantasia, where some people can't visualize what is in their mind, and my own sort of mental imagery is kind of very vague, so I wanted to see what a game would look like if I tried to simulate that art style. Yeah, I love really graphic, like simplified shapes, and this is sort of the approach that I've used for Ring of Pain as well. Like I wanted, especially the card backs, to be quite graphic and illustrative, bold silhouettes and things like that, simple geometry. In general, I subscribe to the sort of make order from chaos approach of art making. Like a picture might become what it's meant to be in the process of painting, rather than me having a full vision straight up, or like having references of particular things that I want to imitate. I really like the exploratory kind of approach to art making. Design-wise, I love roguelikes, I love dungeon crawlers, I love a lot of games, like puzzle games, strategy games. And so it's got inspiration from, modern roguelikes, like Binding of Isaac, Slay the Spire, Dead Cells, and then also things like Dark Souls, and there's a game called I Am Overburdened, which has a really interesting limited inventory mechanic that I sort of adapted for Ring of Pain. From like a lore sort of story angle, I was really inspired by Dead Cells' opt-in kind of narrative, where you don't have to look at the story. You can visit these side rooms and, open a book and get a little snippet of language. And that's how I wanted to integrate this sort of like pervasive creepiness and like the mystery of in the lore of the game we want it to be sort of interesting and have like a story to discover as well. So it's a game about learning and adapting to your surroundings, like mechanically, as well as trying to understand the scope of the world and who you are in it. So I started this project as a solo developer in 2018, I think it was. Yeah, I pitched it to Film Victoria, and so I've worked on a bunch of titles, including Armello, which is, you know, one of the Australian hits. And so Film Victoria very kindly gave me a grant for the product. The transition from, being a concept artist was, well, actually it's surprisingly more accessible than I thought it was to learn to code, to at least put something together that's functional. And functional is what you need to sort of, you know, make a product that can appeal to people enough to get a team involved. Like, you really need to be able to show people stuff to pitch it. But when you've got the ability to make a basic functional product, you know, the art is the way that you get people in, and then the gameplay keeps them playing. So if you can use the skills to appeal to a broad audience and then tighten and iterate the gameplay, I found it quite a good angle to come into making indie games as someone that was solo and then grew a team from it. I think I want people to feel that sense of insight when they're playing it. So being able to see what's around and observe it, and then actually have that realization of how to deal with this sort of like mini puzzle within the full scope of what's going on in the game. I think that is what really appeals to me, like watching streamers get really excited about figuring out how to do the best play for this particular arrangement of the level.
I reckon I'm gonna soul spill, because I have 77 and all that damage is gonna go onto everything, and we're just gonna clear this whole field.
Do it. Nice.
In the Steam Summer Festival, when we put the demo online, you know, it had been up for half a day, and someone was saying they'd been playing the demo for 5 hours, which it's like a 15-minute demo, so they'd just been replaying to see what other content there was in there. That was really surprising, but also kind of warming and reassuring, that even the small demo was enough for them to sort of want to replay, because I'm not into grind. I want to make a game that's like challenging for what it is and then gives you a different experience, but not just forcing you to do some boring repetitive action to see more content. The majority of the issues we've suffered from COVID are delays due to coordinating with external people like testers and things like that need to be scheduled in. Definitely seeing delays at those levels and at platform levels, and I think it's affected everyone, and then those effects compound by each individual company, you know, experiencing it. When things are good and it's not locked down, where it's really good. Like, Melbourne is an amazing space. I'm originally from Perth and I moved here for the opportunities. Like, there's state government funding, which is incredible, from Film Victoria, and there's Creative Victoria support. It's a really good place to be making games, and it's attracted a really diverse and vibrant culture of game developers as well, from all around Australia and even, you know, internationally. So I would say, it's a good city to be in. So I have a bit of an unconventional highlight from PAX 2019 last year, where two boys came and played our game, and they both sat down at the two computers we had set up, and they start playing the tutorial, which is just the first level, and one turns to his friend and says, "What is this? It's like some Yu-Gi-Oh crap." And I thought that was really classic, because it's so far from what it is, but just the first impression from these boys was amazing. I got a great testimonial out of them. Hopefully the future is us sustaining the studio and even potentially growing long term. Like, I want to be adding more content to this game, and I want to be making more new and interesting games. Like, we really want to be creating products that iterate on the medium of games and iterate on genres individually, even if it's just in small ways, and present something that's unique that's really identifiable as like, this is that product. We want to make people see something and know, you know, it's an identifiable thing, and we want to be known for making that kind of game.
Now we've got Brian Holland on Beyond the Veil, which is a super atmospheric horror game, very text-based, very narrative-heavy, that captures not only the musical and the cultural side of New Orleans, but opens up a whole new world to the supernatural. We're really excited about this one.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Holland. I'm the writer and director of Beyond the Veil, and I'm the founder and creative director of Sun Shadow Studios here in Melbourne.
I still get nightmares. That city changed me. I learned quickly that the people, the parties, they're all set dressing. The streets of New Orleans are older than anyone knows. Something ancient lingers beneath the jazz and the liquor and the food. The memories still haunt me. You want to hear about it? All you gotta do is ask. But the rest is up to you. I learned the hard way that once you step up to the threshold, there's no turning back. So don't blame me when the nightmares start.
Beyond the Veil is a text-based horror game where your choices don't only alter the story, but also the personality of the protagonist. The biggest mechanic difference that we've got in Beyond the Veil is that while it is a text-based game, so you'll move around the city, you'll move through the story, you'll have dialogue options, and you'll choose where you're going and what you're doing and how you respond to the world around you. The key difference is your choices also alter the personality traits of the protagonist, Kara. So these are empathy, honesty, belief, jealousy, and happiness. Almost every choice you make will either positively or negatively affect one of those traits, and similar to games like Mass Effect or Dragon Age, where you had sort of like the Paragon and Renegade dichotomy, other choices later on in the game will be gated based on the choices you've made previously. For instance, if you make a bunch of choices early in the game that indicate that your version of Kara is a very honest person, later in the game, when you're caught doing something by the police, you won't have the option to lie to the cops about it because you are honest. So, and the player will be able to go through and see their character sheet, for want of a better word, at any time during the game and sort of see where their traits are at. One of the funnest things we've sort of had is in testing is some of our playtesters going for different builds. The most amusing of which to me as the writer is what's been referred to by the testers as the Mean Girls build, which is somebody with very, very high happiness and very, very low empathy. Which means that she's very rude to everybody all the time and is extremely happy about it, which has been very, very fun. So yeah, the biggest difference is that when you play this game, that will be the story and the way it is presented to Kara will be different based on a number of factors, primarily on how you see your version of the character. The type of story that we wanted to tell and the way I wanted to tell it as a long-time tabletop role-playing enthusiast and now writer, I wanted to do my best to encapsulate what it feels like to play a tabletop role-playing game narratively in a video game. So giving someone as much freedom of choice as possible really only translated realistically into a text-based game. Because if we were a AAA studio doing everything fully animated, we could nowhere near do the number of permutations and choices and decision points as we've done in Beyond the Veil. The feeling and the sense that I want the players to have is that same sense you get when you're sort of curled up and you're just like losing yourself in a good book and a good story. We want you to feel like you can truly explore the city in the way that you want to see it and explore it, and you'll really have a lot of free form. So there are a number of different plot threads in Beyond the Veil, and then when I say that, I don't just mean that there are stories that will change the outcome of based on your choices. There are entirely separate stories, so some of which you might not even see until you play it for the second or third time. So with that amount of free form and what we wanted to do to really encapsulate the city, we thought narrative-based storytelling was the best way to go. Ultimately, the game, while there are many different stories within it, the meta plot of the game is about how people deal with grief. And the other thing that the game is about is really like a love letter to New Orleans as a city. The sense of place and presence that we wanted to get across to really make New Orleans come through as strongly and as evocatively as possible was one of the biggest sort of hurdles we've had to overcome. So we've had to do that in a number of different ways, not just with the text itself, but also with the art. So all the art in Beyond the Veil is based on reference photos that I've actually taken. And then our wonderful lead artist, Lachlan Page, has gone through and taken those really accurate reference images and basically twisted it to see New Orleans through the lens of the game that we're making. So he's done things with the colors, he's muted them, he's made the sky sort of this ambiguous time between night and day. One thing that Lachlan did, which is really, really impressive, is he knows it's a horror game, and some of these very popular locations he actually researched and has put little Easter eggs of historical ghost stories and such in them. So if you actually know a bit about your New Orleans history, there are little things that are hidden in the art which nod to very popular ghost stories and other historical facts about these places you can visit in the game. I have, for some reason, been obsessed with New Orleans since I was about 14, and I've never been able to articulate why. I didn't visit the city until 2016. And I think what it is there's just something truly, wholly unique about that place, and also the way that the denizens of New Orleans and its history interact with horror storytelling. One of my favorite concepts is that if you tell someone from New Orleans a time about you saw a ghost, they don't really judge you or anything, they just listen intently, and then they tell you the time they saw a ghost. Like, you walk around New Orleans and you see signs in the French Quarter about, this place is for lease, or any sort of real estate, and you'll see very sincere signs hung under the address and the phone number for the real estate agent that just says, not haunted. Like, they are very superstitious and very serious. What we really want people to experience is the human condition as seen through the lens of horror. There's a lot of emotion in this game, there's a lot of romance. As I said, the game is ultimately about grief and how we deal with grief. And what I really want and what I'm hoping for is that people who play the game will have a strong emotional response to it. And with all the different storylines in the game and the different types of horror in the game, it's my intention that there should be something for everybody. And while not every storyline or every narrative beat may hit with you personally, there should at least be one or two things or key moments that really do. And for those of us who have a long history with horror and with storytelling, I would hope that there are a number of those moments. For me and for many of us, this is actually our first commercial title, and we're learning a lot about game development as we're going. We're very, very lucky to have been co-funded by the fine folks at Film Victoria, who not only just financially have aided us, but have given us a hell of a lot of really, really great advice and connections all along the way to support us and get us what we need. So with the pandemic hitting and most of us working from home, we're very, very lucky that a lot of our tools were already sort of cloud-based. We ended up having far more sort of face-to-face Zoom meetings than we had been having, just to try and keep everyone in contact and keep those communication channels open. We're quite lucky that there's only a few things that have been majorly affected, such as our travel for promotion, and also I was going to go over to New Orleans again this year to record some more Foley. So we've actually got, when you play the game and you're walking down the French Quarter of New Orleans and you hear the sounds of cars and birds and people walking by, that's actually sound that I've recorded on that street in New Orleans myself, and I was going to go back and do some more of that, but obviously we can't now. Additionally, the only other really negative thing was we were going to do a whole lot of live music recording, but with the current COVID restrictions, it's just not going to happen. But Justin Kavanagh, who again is our sound designer and composer, is actually sort of coordinating all that remotely. So we should be able to get quite a lot of live music, because New Orleans is very, very well known for its music as well as its ghost stories. But I'm pretty happy with how the team has come together and overcome these various sort of pandemic hurdles as best we can. We are fairly fortunate in what we're doing. PAX Australia I've been going to for I think the last 5 years, and I think for the last three years I've actually been running the Horror in Games panel every year, which has been very good. But I think my favorite memory from PAX was actually a couple of years before that, when I was watching a panel and thinking, wow, I would really like to do this one day. And at the time I was still working in fashion retail, and now some 5 years later, I'm sort of full-time game development. And I don't want to pin it all on that moment I had at PAX, but it was definitely a very integral turning point in my life, I suppose. So yeah, I'll always hold PAX very near and dear to my heart for that. What I really want to do next is see Beyond the Veil launch, and it'll be coming out on Steam and iOS before the end of the year. I think the next thing I'm looking at from that is actually porting to Switch, not just because of all the Twitter memes, but because I do believe that this game would be really, really well suited to that console. Depending on how Beyond the Veil goes and how the state of the world is going into 2021, I don't know, let's just say I've still got a lot of ideas of things that I would like to do, and we've also learnt a lot from developing this game that I know that whatever we do next will just be that much better.
Big thanks to Brian. We can't wait to check that game out when it hits soon. We're going to take a little break and have a quick word from our sponsor, but don't go anywhere because we'll be right back after these short messages.
Hi! A couple of months ago, I had the awesome opportunity to check out a test version of the Lenovo Legion 7i gaming laptop. But now I have a retail version of my very own, and it's packaged beautifully. So I'm going to unbox it, I'm going to touch it, I'm going to hold it lovingly, and then I'm going to test a game on it. Feel free to check out my previous video where I talk about how the laptop looks and feels, but right now I'm going to boot up Gears Tactics to show you how the game runs.
Come on, join the party.
So you can see that Gears Tactics is running super well on ultra high. It looks great, great color spectrum, that Dolby Vision serving deeper blacks and brighter whites. Now if you're into overclocking and such, you can explore all the possibilities of pushing the limits of your CPU and your GPU in Lenovo's inbuilt Lenovo Vantage software. You can also tinker with the battery options here, shifting it into quiet mode to save battery. If the battery does need some juice, it can get from 0 to 50% battery charge in under 30 minutes thanks to Rapid Charge Pro, so that's pretty impressive. The True Strike keyboard is responsive to the touch and looks fantastic, and it's super low profile and feels great under the fingertips.
Yep, it's pretty sexy.
I'll put a full list of the specs below, as well as a link to the site if you want to check it out for yourself. You'll see there's options to customize the laptop on the site as well if you want to upgrade anything or add any additional hard drives. The battery life on the 7i is particularly useful to me as I live in the mountains, and that's 2 hours on the train to the city, so I'm excited to get some gaming done on my way to meetings. I'll be doing most of my gameplay videos on the Legion 7i gaming laptop going forward, and they'll be on this channel, so keep an eye out for those. But for now, thanks for watching.
Welcome back to PAX Presents with Lenovo Legion. Thank you again for those messages, and thank you Lenovo for making all this possible. The brand new Lenovo Legion range is here. Flexible meets incredible power with stylish and savage laptops, towers, and peripherals. You can learn more about Lenovo's incredible gaming range at lenovo.com.au/gaming. Please check them out. Next up, we've got Mike Blackney from Team Fan Club. They're something of PAX regulars, they've been at the show for quite a few years. Their game is Dead Static Drive, and the elevator pitch for this one is Grand Theft Cthulhu. And if that doesn't sell you right off the bat, I don't know what to say to you.
I'm Mike Blackney. I'm the director and lead creative, I guess, for Team Fan Club. We are making Dead Static Drive. It's a horror road trip adventure. It's a horror game. It's about traveling on the road and finding a decaying wasteland in front of you. And life begins as a fairly simple road trip, and it changes. And the game becomes about how you meet friends and choosing who's important as you survive. But there's also threats in the way of people. There's police who are out to get you, and that only becomes more true over the course of the game. And so you're surviving, fighting, and fleeing. It's survival, and so you need to travel the world, find supplies, meet people, and decide whether they're safe or not. You need to barricade yourself because there's monsters. You're discovering new locations, and the locations are procedural. So you'll get a different experience when you play the game every time. Yeah, it's top down. It's very much inspired by Micro Machines. And I loved the old Genesis Micro Machines, plus arcade racing games. Super Off-Road, I think, was one of them. Super Off-Road. I think it was maybe Ivan Stewart. It was a really fantastic top-down driving game that I love. Plus Grand Theft Auto, like sheer amount of joy I get out of playing it. An open-world adventure game where you can get into your car, you can drive around, you can cause some chaos, and you don't actually need to have a goal. I love games like that. So those are big inspirations. But also, years ago, when I was playing Grand Theft Auto 3...
Remember, no one messes with my girls. So keep your hands on the wheel. If you don't mess this up, maybe there'll be more work for you. Now get out of here.
I was a bit disappointed that so much of the gameplay was conducted out of the car. They don't actually give you a lot of reasons to use the car, especially at the start of the game. They don't encourage you to do as much in the car, apart from just get from point A to point B. Get someone in the car, drive them around for a little bit, get them out of the car, and then talk and have a shootout. I love using cars as a weapon. I love using it as a problem-solving device. You can use a car to climb on top of it, drive it around. It's like a portable ladder. It's just incredible. And when you add monsters to the mix, like our game does, it suddenly becomes something that's like super engaging to be able to fight and use it as a destruction device. What's quite funny, people often respond really well to the aesthetic of the game because it has a visual style that stands out. I think that now there's more games that look like it than there used to be. But when we first started making it, it was just something that people loved because it was so, I don't know, it was just different. It's closer to Flashback or Prince of Persia. It's more about the outlines and the shapes than about the detail. So people love the style and they just want to get into the world and just be there. And I love that. I love making a place that's from our own imagination and the team's imagination, and people can go there and people can live in it, and it's wonderful. I think one big inspiration is poster art. There's the company Mondo Tees, they do Mondo posters. Their artwork is fairly consistently outstanding, and it's just flat colors and for poster print. And so the goal there seems to be to use as few colors as possible and have them be spot colors for printing. So when you print out a poster, it's really striking, and this use of minimal colors is wonderful. So that was initially a big inspiration for the art style. We wanted to have something that looked just different, you know. Every game seems to look fairly similar these days, but something that was ours and that was our own. We've been helped by Film Victoria twice as far as grants go. They gave us 2 fantastic grants, one to begin work on the game and the second one to complete it. We've also had a few grants to travel, which was fantastic from Film Victoria. They've been so great. Creative Victoria also have given us some funding for going to PAX, which is fantastic. Our game's been supported so much by Epic as well. Epic gave us a grant for making the game when they first announced that they were going to be doing the Epic grants. I didn't know that it was a thing, and I was at GDC at the time. They announced it, and they announced that we'd received one of the first 3 grants. And I found out when I was in a talk, because I had 300 Twitter followers at the time, and suddenly everyone was talking about me. Yeah, so that was wonderful. Epic's helped us, and Xbox has been such an advocate for the game as well. So yeah, we're really lucky. I think we've done 4 PAX Australias now. And we also did PAX East and PAX West over in Seattle and Boston. And those were fantastic opportunities too. But I tell you what, PAX Australia, the support for indie games at PAX Australia is huge. But I tell you what I remember most about PAX is the 6 or 7 weeks afterwards when I have to go past the convention center and I have this really strong, warm memory of how much of a great experience it was just for those 2 or 3 days to be there and to show people what I'm doing and for them to really love it. We did have a planned release, but since coronavirus started, things have become more flexible, let's say. We're definitely not going to push it out early. We want it to come out and be the game that it's meant to be. It's kind of funny, we had an office space last year, and we were working from the office, and because a member of the team left and we didn't really need the space as much, in January we transitioned to working remotely. And it was perfect timing for us, to be completely honest, because I wouldn't want to be spending the money that we would be on an office space right now, considering we were all working from home. But it also helped us to get those habits early when we weren't also dealing with a pandemic, because we have members on the team who have children, and that completely changes, the way you work when you're working from home, or when you're taking kids to daycare or whatever, or just looking after them. It's a very different kind of life. So we've just tried to be as understanding as possible, know that people will not be working at full speed, and they just deserve to have that extra time and to still get paid. We were hoping to start putting feelers out for our next title when we went to GDC this year, but we didn't end up going, and that was probably a good time because it'd be great for us to actually have a prototype when we're talking about it. But we've got ideas for what to do next, and it's this game here started just as me, and it was me doing it by myself in my spare time when I was teaching. The next game, I want it to be a team. I don't want to just be by myself, and thankfully now I know some incredibly talented people who've been helping on the game, and I'd love to keep working with them. It's been such a trip. It started when I was teaching during my classes. I'd have to show a skill, and so I'd do a little bit of 3D modeling and and then I'd take it home and I'd be like, oh, you know what, I can actually make this into a little title, and I'll use this to teach myself Unreal, and never really thought it would go anywhere. And then getting followers on Twitter, getting some attention, getting people starting to really anticipate it, people throwing themselves at the idea of working on it, saying, especially audio designers, getting in touch every 3 days to say, hey, listen, do you have a sound designer? Do you have music set up for the game? It's incredible. I feel like I'm a very different person now from the person I was when I started the game, and it's been a real experience.
You might recognize Ken Wong as the lead designer behind the gorgeous Monument Valley. They do some fantastic work in mountains. They've released Florence recently, and they put out truly beautiful games. Let's hear from them.
So my name is Ken Wong, and I'm the founder and creative director of a game development studio here in Melbourne called Mountains. We're mostly known for a 2018 mobile game called Florence. Florence is a love story. It's sort of like an interactive comic book. That game did pretty well for us. We were able to port it to PC and Switch this year. And I'm also known for working on a game called Monument Valley, which is another mobile game that came out a couple of years back. But I've been working in the games industry for over 15 years now. I've been working in Melbourne for the past 4.5 years now. I really love mobile games. There's something about the fact that you're holding a gaming device in your hand and you're touching the game world directly with your fingers. That's really magical. I think you can do things with that is different from designing games for mouse and keyboard or controller. And so when the team and I started Mountains and we were trying to figure out what kind of game we wanted to make next, we were just thinking about touch interactions and what we can do with touch, what interesting gameplay concepts. And eventually we started playing around with jigsaw puzzles and riffing on how does it feel to put pieces together. And then moving forward from that, how does it feel to take pieces apart? Or how does it feel if you're missing a piece or if the pieces don't quite fit? This started to feel like, what if this was a metaphor for human relationships, right? Like, human relationships are such a big part of our lives, and it started to feel like we could tell a story about two people and all the pieces coming together, maybe the pieces not quite fitting. And so yeah, that was the germ of the idea that led to how do we tell the story of a relationship using touch interactions. I'm a big fan of narrative, but not necessarily in the form of video games. Like, there's just not many game narratives that have necessarily worked for me. So a big part of the adventure of making Florence was figuring out how to tell a story. And I think we sort of organically came to the realization that we could do these setups where we teach the player a mechanic, and then later on in the story, we reverse it or riff on it or repeat it. And that's actually a really good way of showing that a character has changed or that the relationship has changed, right? Like, for example, Florence is in some sort of financial job, like she's probably an accountant. And it feels like her job is really monotonous because you're just clicking on numbers, and we get the player to do that for a little while, and it's meant to feel a little bit boring. But then once she's in a relationship with Krish and she's dating and the world just feels a bit more magical, the game actually just auto-plays itself. And I thought that was a good way to show that her work, even though it's the same job and she's doing the same stuff, it kind of just breezes by. And, you know, hopefully the player just goes like, oh, you know, work just felt like it didn't feel like work anymore. It felt like the day just passed, and I'm looking forward to just getting home to see my boyfriend. My background is in illustration, you know, creating 2D pieces of art. And I love telling a story in visual form, where you put colors and forms and representations onto an image, and people can take away their own interpretation in a way that's a little bit different from words or text. I wanted to carry that across with Florence, and so which creates a little bit of a challenge for us, because it means that we can't just say who Florence is. We have to show you her belongings and show you her apartment and show you what she's eating. And actually, even more than just using visuals, we had to show that through interactive forms. Like, it wasn't good enough to just show you this is what she's having for dinner. We had to make it interactive. So before the relationship, Florence comes home from work and has sushi, and all you do is you tap on the individual bits of sushi. And again, it's meant to feel a bit repetitive. But what we're trying to show there is that it feels monotonous. There's no joy in the eating there. But later on, we show Florence and Krish cooking together, and that interaction is like a little more interesting. You're frying a pan and letting it simmer, and there's something powerful about telling a story through gameplay, essentially, and allowing people to formulate in their own heads what's going on. We were really thrilled with the response that Florence got. It sold pretty well on the App Store, and we brought it out on iOS on Valentine's Day 2018 and on Android a couple of weeks after that. The response from players were that it was a really moving story. It felt really relatable to like a really wide range of people, which is something that we were super happy about, because Florence is the story about two particular people, right? Florence is an Asian Australian woman and Krish is an Indian Australian man. And we were concerned, like, is this going to resonate with people who aren't from an Asian background? Is it going to resonate with queer people? But what we found was that love is love. People could relate to this from a lot of different parts of the world, from a lot of different sexual orientations. And that was just really heartening that we created something that meant something to people. You know, a lot of people said that they cried or they almost cried, and they shook their fist at us for making them cry on public transport. That's just an unbelievable response because we believe that video games can and should really mean something in people's lives, and that video games can be art. Couldn't have asked for a better response, really. Florence is a short story, so we didn't want to like show it off too much, but we did test with family and friends. However, the biggest test was actually at PAX Australia 2017, where we brought a 7-level demo to the show floor, and we just had people come by, and we had bean bags that people could sit down and play on an iPad, because we wanted to sort of mimic how people would be playing the game at home. So we wanted to make them comfortable, and something that we didn't anticipate was that some couples came by and sort of played the game together. It was really great seeing them sit down, put on their headphones, have a little taste of what we were trying to do. And the response was like really, really great. Like people wanted more. You had a bunch of people like crying or almost crying. And I think that was the first time that we were showing the game with music. And music just played such a big part of the game. Kevin Penkin, our composer, was actually at PAX that year and helped run the booth and show off the game, so he got to hear feedback from people right away. So that was a really memorable experience in the development of Florence. The Australian game scene and the Melbourne game scene is really, really interesting. There's a really great community here that's really close and really supportive of each other. It's really diverse. You've got a lot of really diverse creators from different backgrounds. You've got some studios making AAA games and really big free-to-play games, and then you've got a lot of indie studios making, studios of like 2 people, 5 people, 10 people, making their dream game. I think one of the interesting characteristics of the Melbourne dev scene is that the government has been really supportive of us. Creative Victoria and Film Victoria, through their various programs, help us go to conferences like GDC, help sponsor us for events like PAX, help us just kind of help promote Victorian games and Melbourne games, and help support our developers on the worldwide stage. So that's a huge blessing. Definitely a lot of the success of Mountains has been due to government support and the support of the community in general. The lockdown and COVID has been a real challenge for the team. At Mountains, we really embrace talking about mental health, because I think that's a really big issue for gamers and game developers. So we're always trying to check on each other and talk through the challenges of our everyday life and work, but particularly with this pandemic, the social isolation has been a big challenge. And so we're doing what we can to keep in contact with each other and trying to keep the social bonds that we had when we were in the office, trying to keep those active while we're working remote. And look, productivity has gone down. Like, we just don't expect people to work as much or as hard as they did previously, like when you have to work out of your own home and there's all these like worries in the world, and potentially you've got family members that aren't doing well or who you don't get to see. Yeah, we're doing the best we can. And I think we just feel really fortunate that our business has been minimally affected by the pandemic. We can still make games, we can still do that remotely. Sales of Florence haven't really suffered. So yeah, we're doing okay. We feel really fortunate that we still get to work and hang out.
And the BAFTA for mobile game is awarded to Florence.
So Mountains is really working really hard on a couple of projects actually, and unfortunately it's still a little bit too early to talk about them, but they're really exciting. They're not sequels to Florence, and they're not really related, but they're also, I think they continue the spirit of trying to make really beautiful, interesting games.
Last but no means least, we've got League of Geeks. Best known for their game on Mellow, League of Geeks has gone on to be one of the greatest indie success stories from Australia in recent years. Let's hear from one of their founders, Trent Custers.
My name's Trent Custers, and I'm one of the co-founders and directors over at League of Geeks. We call us a AAA/independent development studio here in Melbourne, Australia. League of Geeks, our studio is probably best known for a game. Well, it is known for a game that we made because it's the only game we've made so far. It's called Armello, and it's essentially Game of Thrones meets Kung Fu Panda as a digital board game. So back in the days when there really weren't any digital board games, we thought, oh wow, this iPad business is pretty cool. Imagine if you could play a board game on this that was designed specifically for it. And then snap forward like 5 years and we're launching a game on PS4 and Xbox and PC and Mac and Linux and everything else now. And yeah, it's a beautiful experiment in bringing a board game to life. And you play as like rat rogues and wolf warriors trying to become the hero of Armello before any of the other heroes and to depose the king who's fallen to this dark force called the Rot. Really, the inspiration was that no one was doing it. There was a real gap in the market. We were like, why isn't anyone making board games specifically for digital platforms that you can sit around and play with your mates or play with friends? You know, we come together to play board games. That's great. We'll never get rid of that. That's fantastic. No one's going to, you know, usurp that with actual video games. But you know, what about folks who've moved apart, interstate or something, you know, and they want to play board games with their family, or especially like in this new world, we had no idea that this was going to happen, ISO, right? But people playing digital board games now that used to get together for board game nights. So we just wanted a digital board game. And we loved telling stories, and we wanted to tell a story about, you know, some like fantasy adventure where you could backstab your friends and there was political intrigue and Machiavellian tactics. And we'd always wanted to make a game that was, you know, sort of based on anthro fables, you know, like I said, rat rogues and wolf warriors and stuff like that. And it all came together, and that was sort of where it all started. And then we just filled in the gaps from there. When we released the game, the reception was fantastic. We've been working on it for so long, and we built up a bit of momentum behind the game with the marketing that we'd done, and especially being quite internationally focused instead of just, you know, focusing locally, that I think like a lot of devs were doing at the time here in Australia. We really set our sights overseas. When the game came out, it was a great response. We first launched in early access, and I think the way that we went about early access, was really well received by people. You know, our update cadence, how we implemented community feedback, how we rolled out features and new updates and branded them in these really exciting ways. And so coming out of early access, we had a lot of momentum, and then we were adding new platforms to the mix as well, and a bunch of new content. We kept a whole heap of features up our sleeve for a bit of a mic drop announce leading up to launch. We launched into a pretty hectic window. There was a lot of things coming out around the time, but yeah, it did well. I think we would have loved for it to do a bit better, but we've built a wonderful studio and a team, and have leveraged it into getting a second game signed with a fantastic new publisher. And yeah, we're in a great spot. We're very proud of what we've achieved with Armello. I guess coming from humble beginnings of, you know, working on your game out of hours and working out of your bedroom and, you know, meeting up once a week in like a restaurant or a cafe or something like that to chat to your other co-founders or studio mates. Going from that to now having a studio that has 40 or so people in it and working on a big game, you know, almost 10 times the size of the one before. It's really challenging. It's not without its challenges for sure, but it's also really exciting. The founders of League of Geeks, we come from more traditional, larger scale, you know, studio and console development and PC development. And so being able to, you know, go back to that and work with a larger team and foster a larger team, and especially when there hasn't been a lot of that around in the local industry too, seeing that there's an opportunity for us to take up that torch and step forward and provide opportunities for talent in Australia that may not have had that opportunity if we weren't there carving out a space for them. We're not the only ones doing it, but for every studio that makes that step into the next phase, you know, for us going from indie to III, that means there's however many more jobs for, you know, creatives to be making great products, and especially those of us who are doing original IP out of Australia that's Australian owned and, you know, made by Australian creatives. It's really exciting stuff for our region, and again, just like the success of our game, it fills us with a lot of pride to be able to do that and to say that we've achieved this. And, you know, we make mistakes every day and we're up all the time, but it's good. We're getting there slowly but surely. we were really given a leg up by the state funding and the support that Film Victoria and Creative Victoria as well can provide local practitioners in the games industry. Even when there was just 3 or 4 of us throwing this thing together out of hours, they were helping us get overseas and to conferences and stuff, giving us money to help with marketing the announcement of the game. And then that moved into actual like enterprise funding to help us actually scale the studio. And now we still utilize some funding just to help get people on board to our studio, you know, to help more underrepresented people like actually step into our studio and give people opportunities that we may not have, even at our scale and size, may not be able to do without a little bit of assistance from Film Victoria. That role that we're sort of questioning, can we really justify that role? When Film Victoria puts, you know, 20K on the table or something like that to help get that person on board and foster that talent and bring them into our team and give them the experience and the job, it really helps out. So we have a really, really close relationship with the state funding bodies and Creative Victoria, Film Victoria, and even ones outside of the state. And it's just such a fantastic initiative that we have here in Australia, and the stuff that's happening in South Australia is really great right now. But yeah, we've been very, very lucky, all developers in Victoria, to have the support that the state funding and the state government offers here. The transition to working from home due to COVID-19 and all of the restrictions that came in has been challenging. It's, you know, even when you work in a purely digital industry or like, you know, format that we do, you know, we make it digitally and we ship it digitally and people play it digitally. It's still not without its challenges. We have a fantastic studio space in the arcade in Melbourne, a game development co-working space that's fantastic. And we love that space. We go in there every day to collaborate with folks, you know, on the whiteboards or in the meeting rooms or standing up around, you know, the scrum area, or just at people's desks. And to not have that space that we all go to, that environment that's our own, that we've curated over the years, is really tough, and we all miss it. And we all get along at League of Geeks. We're all mates as well. A lot of people really enjoy working with their colleagues. That's why we're together. It's really part of our mission. We say that we craft inspiring video games and enthralling worlds with exceptional people. And so you want to spend time with those exceptional people. And it's been hard, but I'd like to say, just like a lot of other developers, you know, around the world, and especially in Melbourne and Australia, we really rose to the challenge of embracing this thing early and doing it right, and making sure that our team had the support that they need, and that we had policies in place to make sure that they have the structure and the frameworks to make sure that they're looking out for themselves, and that we're also, you know, still working on the game and being productive and efficient and communicating effectively. It's been a challenge, but it's one that will make us stronger in the end. I think the industry and us at League of Geeks too, for, you know, creating new practices and overcoming these challenges. The first place that we ever demoed Armello to the public was at the first PAX Australia ever. That was the first public hands-on demo of the game all those years ago. And then since then, we've demoed the game. We've exhibited at, I think, maybe 10 or 15 different PAXs all around the world, whether it be, you know, in Boston or in Seattle, or whether it's in San Antonio or Melbourne. Like we've been to them all, and we just love the PAX vibe. League of Geeks has always been, even when we're not exhibiting, we're often just going to, you know, rock up and hang out with our mates and see our fans who are over there, and, you know, say good day and really soak up the PAX vibe. So PAX has had a huge role in the development of our game Armello. I don't know of any other convention that I've ever been to where the vibe is just so great. Like everyone is just so pleasant. Everyone's there to just play games and hang out and meet cool folks and talk to developers about their games, or like hang out and play some Dungeons and Dragons with their friends, or, you know, check out that new board game from this company. It's really, really a special place, and the vibe is so great. Almost everyone that comes up and like wants to see our game or like wants to have a play of it is just brings such energy. I would always come back from the PAXs and say to the team, hey, I just wish you could have all been there and seen just how fucking excited everyone was for our game. Being a dev in Australia is a weird one, because we're like, you know, it's an international industry. We ship internationally. No one just ships their game only to Australia. Like most of our players aren't in Australia. They're in other parts of the world, whether that be Germany or Taiwan or the US or wherever. But we have such a brilliant local scene here in Melbourne. The Australian scene is really great, of course, as well, but also Melbourne is just is quite exceptional. I've traveled the world a lot, just being involved in the indie community and, you know, going to different game cons and spending time around the world and hanging out in places everywhere from Palestine to Berlin to, to Taiwan, to Kyoto, to Seattle, and like seeing all of these different indie scenes and hanging out with developers from those cities and going to events there. And we're so incredibly lucky in Melbourne to have the ecosystem that we have, whether it be larger studios like Fire Monkeys or Sledgehammer, all the way down to just like really sort of skunkworks, like trash video game bars, like, Bar SK that was around, or the great work that Free Play does. There's really, really a great ecosystem here for all sort of almost all rungs of video games, and to be a part of that is a really, really energizing community. And I think the reason why you see a lot of great games come out of Melbourne is just because of the quality and the caliber of the community and the conversations and the collaboration that we're all having here as a community. Yeah, we're going through a really exciting period at League of Geeks, and to be honest, it just the future looks even brighter. And I'm really proud to say we've just announced a partnership with Private Division, a publisher based out of the States, really great friends of ours. We've been working with them for a while now on our new project, which we can't say anything about, but an ambitious new video game and IP, our own IP, that we've partnered with them on, and we've been working on that for a little while now. And that's super exciting. And also we're still supporting our Mellow too. Hopefully, we were hoping to have some news out about what's going on with that recently, but COVID slowed that down. But yeah, exciting stuff for us. We've hired 20 people in the last year, in the last 12 months. We're still hiring more. We made a hire today. We made a hire last week. The studio is just getting stronger and bigger and better, and the games we're making are getting bigger and better and bolder as well. And we're making great strategic partnerships that won't just have a benefit for us, but for the entire region as well. So yeah, we're really proud of what we're building, and we're growing, and we're just looking for more people to come and join us on this journey.
And that's it for this week's episode of PAX Presents with Lenovo Legion. Massive thank you to Lenovo. The Lenovo Legion range is here. The brand new range mixes flexibility with incredible power with stylish and savage laptops, towers, and peripherals. Learn more about the incredible Lenovo range at lenovo.com.au/gaming. In the meantime, make sure you're back next week, 7 p.m. Thursday night for more PAX Presents, and strap in because we're only a few weeks away from PAX Online, September 12 to 20, coming soon to an internet connection near you.